Hey everyone, welcome back to Native Speakers Channel. I'm Sarah, and I'm so excited you're here with us today. Whether you're joining us for the first time or you're a regular viewer, we're thrilled to have you. We've got such a great conversation lined up for you today, so grab a cup of coffee, get comfortable, and let's dive in.
Thanks, Sarah, and hello to all our amazing viewers. Today, we're tackling something that I know so many of you have been asking about in the comments. We're talking about how to actually become a good English student and learn fast. I mean, let's be real. Fluency doesn't happen overnight, but there are definitely strategies that can accelerate your progress. So, Sarah, where do you think we should start with this?
You know, Johnny, I think the first thing we need to address is mindset. Because honestly, I've seen so many language learners get in their own way before they even begin. They think, oh, I'm not good at languages, or I'm too old to learn, or I don't have the language gene. But here's the truth. There's no such thing as a language gene. Anyone can learn English if they approach it the right way.
Absolutely, and I love that you brought up mindset because it's so foundational. I remember when I was learning Spanish, I had this moment where I realized that my biggest obstacle wasn't the grammar or the vocabulary. It was my own fear of making mistakes. Once I got over that mental block and just started speaking, even when I sounded ridiculous, that's when my learning really took off.
That's such a great point. The fear of making mistakes is probably the number one thing that holds people back. But think about it this way. When you were a child learning your native language, you made mistakes constantly, right? You said things wrong, you mixed up words, and nobody judged you for it. Everyone just smiled and gently corrected you. That's the attitude we need to have as adult learners, too.
Exactly. So let's talk about practical strategies. What do you think is the most important habit that a good English student should develop?
Ooh, that's tough because there are so many good habits. But if I had to choose one, I'd say consistency beats intensity every single time. It's way better to study English for 20 minutes every single day than to cram for 3 hours once a week. Your brain needs regular exposure to the language to really absorb it and make those neural connections.
I could not agree more. It's like going to the gym, right? You don't go once a month for 8 hours and expect to get fit. You go regularly, even if it's just for short sessions. And with language learning, that daily exposure keeps the language fresh in your mind. It prevents you from forgetting what you learned yesterday or last week.
Exactly. And here's something else that I think is crucial: diversifying your learning methods. Don't just stick to one textbook or one app. A truly effective English student uses multiple resources and approaches. Maybe you use an app like Duolingo in the morning while you're having breakfast, then you listen to an English podcast during your commute, then you watch a TV show in English in the evening, and maybe you journal in English before bed.
Yes, that variety is so important because it keeps things interesting, first of all, but it also exposes you to English in different contexts. When you only use a textbook, you're getting very formal, structured English. But when you watch a sitcom or listen to a podcast like ours, you're hearing natural, conversational English with all its idioms and slang and cultural references.
And speaking of listening, can we talk about how underrated listening practices? I feel like so many students focus heavily on reading and writing, which are important, but they neglect listening. And then they get frustrated when they can't understand native speakers in real conversations.
Oh man, this is such a pet peeve of mine. Listening is absolutely critical, and it needs to be active listening, not just passive background noise. You know what I mean? Like, if you're just playing English podcasts while you're scrolling through your phone, that's not really effective practice.
Right. Active listening means really focusing on what you're hearing, trying to catch every word, replaying sections you didn't understand, and maybe even taking notes on new vocabulary or expressions. And here's a technique I love. Listen to the same content multiple times. The first time, just get the general idea. The second time, try to catch more details. The third time, focus on pronunciation and intonation.
That's brilliant. Repetition is so powerful for learning, and it brings me to another point, input versus output. A lot of learners think they need to start speaking right away, but actually you need a lot of input first. You need to hear and read a ton of English before you can produce it naturally.
Yes, although I would add that you shouldn't wait too long to start speaking. It's a balance, right? You need input to build your foundation, but you also need output to practice and improve. And honestly, speaking is where you'll make the most noticeable progress because it forces you to actively retrieve and use the language.
Totally agree. So let's give our viewers some concrete advice about speaking practice. What would you recommend for someone who doesn't have native English speakers to practice with regularly?
Great question. First of all, thanks to technology, you actually have tons of options now. You can find language exchange partners on apps like HelloTalk or Tandem. You can join online conversation clubs or take lessons with tutors on platforms like italki or Preply. But even if you don't want to do any of that, you can practice speaking to yourself.
Yes, talking to yourself is seriously underrated. I do this all the time when I'm learning a language. I'll narrate what I'm doing while I'm cooking dinner, or I'll have imaginary conversations while I'm driving. It might feel weird at first, but it's actually super effective because you can practice without any pressure or fear of judgment.
And you can record yourself too. That's something I always recommend. Record yourself speaking about a topic for 2 or 3 minutes, then listen back to it. You'll notice your own mistakes. You'll hear where you hesitate or struggle, and you can track your improvement over time.
That's such good advice. Now let's talk about vocabulary building because this is where a lot of students get overwhelmed. There are just so many words in English. How do you approach learning vocabulary efficiently?
Okay, so here's my philosophy on vocabulary. Quality over quantity. Don't try to memorize huge lists of random words. Instead, learn vocabulary in context and focus on high-frequency words first. There are studies showing that knowing the 1,000 most common English words gives you about 80% comprehension in everyday situations.
Wow, I didn't know the percentage was that high. That's actually really encouraging for learners to hear. So instead of trying to learn obscure words like sesquipedalian or whatever, focus on the words you'll actually use every day.
Exactly. And when you do learn new vocabulary, don't just memorize definitions. Learn how the word is used in sentences, what words it commonly appears with, and whether it's formal or informal. For example, the words commence and start mean the same thing, but you wouldn't say, let's commence eating at a casual dinner with friends.
Right. You'd sound like you're in a business meeting or a legal document. Context is everything. And I think this ties into something else that's really important, learning phrases and chunks, not just individual words. Native speakers don't really think word by word. We think in phrases and expressions.
Yes, this is so important. When you learn phrases like, on the other hand, to be honest, or I'd rather not, you're learning how words naturally combine in English. It makes your speech sound much more fluent and natural.
Absolutely. And it's faster, too, because you're learning multiple words at once in a way that you can immediately use them. Speaking of speaking naturally, can we talk about pronunciation? Because I feel like this is an area where students often don't know how to improve.
Oh, pronunciation is fascinating. And here's something important. You don't need to have a perfect accent to be fluent. There are millions of people around the world who speak excellent English with their own unique accents. The goal isn't to sound exactly like someone from California or London. The goal is to be clear and understandable.
That's such an important distinction. But there are certain things that can really improve your clarity, right? Like working on the sounds that don't exist in your native language or understanding stress and intonation patterns.
Exactly. For example, if your native language is Spanish, you might struggle with sounds like th or the difference between B and V. If you're a native Mandarin speaker, you might find the R and L sounds challenging. The key is to identify your specific pronunciation challenges and work on those deliberately.
And there are great resources for this now. YouTube has tons of pronunciation tutorials. There are apps that give you feedback on your pronunciation. And you can always record yourself and compare it to native speakers. The important thing is to practice regularly and pay attention to the sounds you're making.
Definitely. And don't forget about rhythm and intonation. English is a stress-timed language, which means we stress certain syllables and words, and we kind of rush through others. This creates a rhythm that's really important for sounding natural. When non-native speakers speak with flat intonation, it can be harder to understand even if their grammar is perfect.
Great point. Okay, so we've talked about mindset, consistency, diverse learning methods, listening, speaking, vocabulary, and pronunciation. What about grammar? Because I know some students get really bogged down in grammar rules.
Grammar is interesting because you definitely need to understand the basic structures, but you can also overdo it. I've met students who can explain every grammar rule perfectly, but can barely hold a conversation. That's not fluency, that's just theoretical knowledge.
Right. Grammar should serve your communication, not hinder it. I think the best approach is to learn grammar in context through reading and listening, and then use it actively in your speaking and writing. When you make mistakes, that's when you look up the rule and try to understand it.
Yes, learning from your mistakes is so much more effective than just memorizing rules from a textbook, because when you make a mistake and then correct it, your brain creates a stronger connection. You're more likely to remember it because it was your own error that you fixed.
Absolutely. And I think this is a good time to mention something about goals. A good English student sets clear, specific goals. Not just, I want to be fluent, but something like, I want to be able to have a 15-minute conversation about my job in English. Or, I want to understand 80% of a TV show without subtitles.
Yes, SMART goals, right? Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. When you have concrete goals, you can track your progress and stay motivated. And speaking of motivation, that's another huge factor in being a good English student.
Motivation is everything. Because let's be honest, learning a language is hard work. It takes time, it takes effort, and there will be days when you don't feel like studying. The students who succeed are the ones who find ways to keep themselves motivated even when it gets tough.
And I think connecting English to things you already love is a great way to stay motivated. If you love cooking, watch cooking shows in English. If you're into sports, follow English-speaking sports commentators and read sports news in English. If you love music, listen to English songs and look up the lyrics. When English becomes part of your hobbies and interests, it stops feeling like work.
That's such good advice. And it makes the learning sustainable, too. You're not forcing yourself to do something boring. You're enjoying content you'd consume anyway, just in English.
Exactly. And here's one more thing I want to mention: community and accountability. Learning English with others, whether it's in a class, with a study buddy, or in an online community, can make a huge difference. You can encourage each other, share resources, practice together, and celebrate progress together.
Yes, and it makes the journey less lonely. Language learning can sometimes feel isolating, especially if you're self-studying. But when you have a community, you realize that everyone struggles with the same things. Everyone makes mistakes, and everyone has breakthroughs. It's comforting and motivating.
Absolutely. And I think that brings us back to where we started: mindset. Being a good English student isn't just about the techniques and strategies, although those are important. It's about believing in yourself, being patient with your progress, staying consistent, and enjoying the journey.
Perfectly said, Sarah. And to everyone watching, remember that fluency is absolutely achievable. It won't happen overnight, but if you show up every day, use the strategies we've talked about, and keep pushing yourself just a little bit outside your comfort zone, you will get there.
We believe in you, and we're here to support you every step of the way. Keep watching our videos, keep practicing, and don't give up. You've got this.
Thanks so much for watching, everyone. If you found this conversation helpful, please give us a thumbs up, subscribe to Native Speakers channel, and let us know in the comments what you want us to talk about next. Until next time, keep learning and keep improving.
See you in the next video. Bye, everyone.